With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become? Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Two-Footed Podcast here on EPL Index. Now, before we kick things off today, I just want to share something with everybody. This episode is brought to you by our partners at Sky Bet. We've teamed up with Sky Bet because they truly understand what it means to be a fan. Sky Bet appreciates the length that people go through to support their team in all areas, whether you're a match-going fan or otherwise, and there's just no better fit for us right now than a partnership with the good folks at Sky Bet. So with that said, let's go. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Friday. It is the 7th of June, and we hope you're all doing well and having yourself a very pleasant day. Right, the plan for today, because obviously I wasn't here Monday because it was a bank holiday, and I do want to get through all 20 teams, is I'm going to do two today. So I'll do a team, then a break, then a team, then another break, and then we'll do news and gossip. And next week I will not be here Wednesday. So one of the days next week I'll have to do two teams as well. So we've done Arsenal, we've done Aston Villa, and we have done Bournemouth. So now we move on to Brentford and Brighton. So we'll do Brentford first and then jump to Brighton after the break. Brentford had a weird year. I think everybody accepts it's a weird, disappointing season. They finished in 16th. And if it wasn't for a decent little run in mid-March to late April, it's possible they would have been dragged into the relegation muck. Because I do think the clubs that went down, there was an element of giving up once the gaps got too big. But Brentford were just so disappointing. They started the season well. Obviously, no Ivan Toney coming into the season with the suspension. So the question was, can they score enough goals? And the answer was yes, they could. They scored 2 on the opening day in a draw against Spurs. Then they went to Fulham and beat them 3-0. They drew at home with both Crystal Palace and Bournemouth and scored 3 goals across those 2 games. Then they went north and lost at Newcastle. And you know what? Fair enough. A lot of teams lose at Newcastle. They're a good team. The 3-1 defeat at home to Everton was the first sort of, oh, that doesn't look good moment of the season. They drew 1-1 away to Forest and lost 2-1 away to Manchester United. A game they should have won, the game that they were 1-0 up in, going into the 93rd minute, and somehow managed to lose 2-1. But they bounced back from that. They beat Burnley 3-0, Chelsea 2-0 at the Bridge, and then beat West Ham 3-2 at home. Coming from behind in that game, having gone 1 up, they went 2-1 down and then came back with 2 second-half goals and got the win. But from there, things took a turn. That is 4 wins, 4 draws, and 3 defeats through 11 games. But from there, which is the 4th of November, up until the end of the season, they only won 6 more games. And 3 of them came in the last 6 weeks of the season. So you've got a run that begins with a 3-0 defeat away to Liverpool, which is fine. all the way up to the 3-3 draw with Brentford. That's the 12th of November to the 6th of April. They only win 3 games. They draw 4, but only win 3 games. And you put that against 14 defeats in this run. Lose to Liverpool away, fine. Lose to Arsenal at home, fine. And very unlucky. Very, very unfortunate in that game. Deserved to win that game. Should have been 2-0 up before Kai Havertz scored. Then they go and they beat, and this is the other problem, is who they actually beat. They beat Luton 3-1 at home. You should beat Luton. They lose away to Brighton. They lose away to Sheffield United. They lose at home to Villa, fair enough. They get hammered at home by Wolves. And then they lose away to Crystal Palace. 5 defeats in a row. Then they beat Nottingham Forest 3-2 at home. And in truth, made tougher work of it than they should have. But you should beat Forest at home. Number 1, they're not good. And number 2, you're at home. Then they lose away to Tottenham. Fair enough. 3-2. They actually put in a decent showing. They lose 3-1 at home to City. Again, fair enough. They were 1-0 up. Foden scored a hat-trick. What can you do? They go and they beat Wolves 2-0 away, which is a good result. Then they lose to Liverpool, lose to City, lose to West Ham, draw with Chelsea, lose to Arsenal, lose to Burnley. Now, there's a lot of tough games in that run. Obviously, you play Arsenal twice, you play Liverpool twice, you play City, you play Villa, you play Spurs. Those are games you can accept losing in if you're Brentford. But like losing at home to Wolves is a poor result. I think for them, losing away to Burnley is a really poor result. Like, Burnley were not good this season. And to lose that game was very, very poor. You draw with United at home, you draw with Brighton at home, you draw with Villa at home. And it doesn't seem like much, but that's their first 3-game unbeaten run since October, November, when they beat Burnley, beat Chelsea, and beat West Ham. The difference being they took 9 points from that 3-game run and only 3 points here. But they did follow it up by beating Sheffield United at home and hammering Luton away. And they're games they had to win. And that's where you would give Thomas Frank credit, is it? At the end of the season, there were games that they could target to get points from. And they went and did it. Now, they did lose away to Everton, but having beaten Sheffield United and Luton, it was less of an issue. They drew at home with Fulham, and then they beat Bournemouth away, which, good result. A little bit fortunate, but, nonetheless, good result. They lost at home to Newcastle on the final day, but it was totally irrelevant. Disappointing in the Cups, 3rd round exit. Drew at home with Wolves, then lost the replay away after extra time. Beat Newport County on penalties in the 2nd round of the EFL Cup, and then lost to Arsenal, which, fair enough. Though it was at home, which is a little bit disappointing. Overall, it's just a very disappointing season. Out of both cups really early, 16th in the league. Now, look, they did finish 13 points clear of Luton, who by the end of the year had just kind of given up. But to lose 19 games is just so disappointing. To concede 65 goals, really disappointing. They did score enough, though. Like, they scored 56 goals. Which, given Tony missed half the season, that when he did come back, he might as well have not come back. That's a really good return. Like, Ivan Toney scored 4 goals this season in the league. So without him, they were still able to find consistent sources of goals. And that number 56 that they scored, That's the highest in the bottom half. It's the 11th best in the league. Better than Brighton, better than Bournemouth, better than Fulham, better than Wolves, better than all the bottom half teams. But the 65 goals conceded is not great. Now, there's plenty of teams conceded more. West Ham conceded 74 and they finished 9th. Bournemouth conceded 67. Admittedly, a lot of theirs were at the start of the season when they were trying to figure things out. Forest conceded 67, and obviously the bottom three were all shambolically bad defensively. It will never stop amusing me, though, that West Ham had the 4th worst defensive record in the league, under David Moyes, who's primarily a defensive manager. One of the issues they've had is that the money they've spent since they've come up has not always been spent well. And I went through this recently with Carl Matchett, but I'll run back over it again just to sort of make the point. If you look at the summer of 2020, which is the summer before they came up, they signed Ivan Toney and Vitaly Yanov, 2 immensely important signings for them. They'd obviously done a lot of good business before that, but that was 2 huge gets for them. So they get promoted. They sign Onyeka, hasn't really worked out. Ayer hasn't worked out because of injuries, but he's a good player. Wissa has worked out. He's been good. They signed Eriksson on a free. He leaves after 6 months, but it did work out. But of the summer signings, of the signings, say, over £5 million, Onyeka, Ayer and Wissa, you could only really make a case for Wissa as a good signing because Ayers had the injuries, and Onyeka, it appears like he's just a squad player. We move on. Summer 2022, you bring in Aaron Hickey, 17 million. Good player, but he's been injured quite a bit. Keane Lewis-Potter looks a good player, hasn't really performed. No way to call that a success. Mikkel Damsgaard, 17 million. Can't really call that one a success either because he's been flat out poor. And then we look at last summer, the Kevin Schade deal that they'd done in the January was a loan with an obligation to buy. They paid 22 million for him. Hasn't worked out yet. Yet is the key term here, though, because I do believe it will work out. Nathan Collins, 23 million. Hasn't worked out yet, but I do have faith in that one. I have faith in the Hickey one as well to stay fit. But Mark Flecken for 11 million, I think, has been quite poor. So if we're looking at the signings they've made for over 5 million, not even a big fee, over 5 million since coming up, you can only really make an argument for Wissa. The others, injuries and poor form, or maybe not quite been good enough in the case of Onyeka. They're good enough to be a squad player for sure, but not good enough to be a starter. And when you're Brentford paying, 8-9 million, I think you're looking, especially when you've just come up, you're looking for a starter, and he hasn't been that. They signed Eunice Emery-Connock in January for 4 million, 4.5 million, somewhere like that. So under the 5 million, he hasn't played yet, but he's meant to be an exceptional prospect. So maybe one just to keep an eye on. But like I say, the issue I have here is that the signings just haven't been up to scratch since coming up. But if we think back to when Brighton first came up, and obviously they've got similar enough models, when Brighton first came up, there was a number of years there where there was a lot of poor signings. And then they found the formula. And it's been great since. So maybe Brentford, who are, they're establishing themselves as a Premier League club. That's 3 years completed now. And no real concerns of going down in terms of 13 points clear at the top. Or 13 points clear, rather, of the team relegated in 18th this year. If we look at last year, they were very, very comfortable, obviously finishing in 9th, a full 25 points clear of Leicester. And the season before, they finished 13th, 11 points clear of Burnley. Now, at one point, it did look like they might go down. They had a horrible run through the middle of the season, but then they rectified things. But they haven't really been in any peril as yet. And that's in large part due to what they brought up. If we look at the players that played a lot for them, Ethan Pinnock, 29 games in the league. Christian Norgard, 31 games. Matthias Jensen, 32 games. Brian Mbomo, 25 games. Vitaly Janelt, 38 games. Mads Roerslev, 33 games. All of them came up with them from the Championship. So I do think there is a little bit of... Some of them are a little bit older. For example, Ethan Pinnock now at this point is 31. Norgard, I believe, is now 30 as well, and he's had to deal with some injuries. Some of them, frankly, just aren't good enough, and I would say Roerslev isn't quite good enough to be starting 22 games and appearing in 33 games. I think it's just too big a stretch. I do think it's gone a little bit stale there, and I do wonder if maybe it might be getting towards the time, not because he's not a good manager, because I really do think he's a good manager, but I do wonder if maybe the Thomas Frank message is going a little bit stale. He's been there 6 years now. That's a long time to spend at one club. I know that United are very keen on him, and we have Miguel Delaney reporting today that he would be one of the favourites for that job. His name is there. Southgate apparently has emerged as the priority, and Miguel knows people at United. Miguel is what I sometimes might call him little Mig, or I might snort at his reporting on Liverpool or whatever. He knows his stuff about United. I'd never knock him on that. He's as well tuned in at United as pretty much anybody. And he also has a decent track record with Ineos. So I would say that's well sourced that Southgate is the lead choice. But Thomas Frank could obviously be a better appointment because he's a better manager. So therefore Brentford would need a new manager. It's not just that he's been at Brentford as the manager for 6 years. He was also the assistant there for 2 years. So I'm not going to go player by player, but I'd be pretty certain there's nobody at the club longer than him in terms of playing staff. So it might just have gone a little bit stale. But my guess is he's there for next season, and then at the end of next season, maybe there's a parting of the ways. I do think they need to improve ever so slightly in terms of their recruitment. Just fine-tune it a little bit. They're always targeting good players, and they get linked with really good players, and they go down the road with really good players. And like they tried to sign Bakayoko and Nusa in January, 2 new wingers, and they ended up getting neither. Now, what they did do was they secured Igor Thiago, the Brazilian striker from Club Brugge, 22 years of age, 6'2", proven over the last 2 seasons that he's really adaptable, having come through the academy at Cruzeiro in Brazil. He left and joined. Remember I said, was it yesterday or the day before, about, you do often just see random Brazilian players dotted around Eastern Europe. Well, he went to Ludogorets in Bulgaria from Cruzeiro. Had 1 season there, scored 20 goals in 53 games in all competitions. This past season, he's got 29 in 55 in all competitions. There's 2 positive things there. Number 1, he is capable of playing a lot of games. And number 2, he's adaptable and can translate his goal scoring from one league to another. Now, there is a big jump from the Belgian Pro League to the Premier League, and we'll see how he handles it. But he looks like he's got the tools. He looked really good when I saw him play in Europe a couple of times. That's tipping the hand that Tony is leaving this summer. 1 year left in his deal. He's almost certainly off. I wonder, might they revisit a move for Nusa? Now, he did fail a medical, but there's been no public word on what that might be. Maybe it's likely they won't go back in for him. I do think they might go back for Bakayoko, and we've obviously heard this summer from Brian Mbeumo that he, wants to play at the highest level, wants to play for a top club. I don't know that I could see them letting Tony and Mbeumo leave in the one summer. So I think they might try and keep Mbeumo. But it wouldn't surprise me if we also saw them go and try and get his replacement to have him in-house this summer. And I think the hope then will be that that new winger plus Igor Thiago and then Kevin Schade on the left would be their future front line. And, you look at the age profiles. Kevin Schade is 22. Igor Thiago, as I said, is 22. You've still got Lewis Potter there, who's 23 now. But it is a talented player, without doubt. Wiss is not that old. What is he? 27. He'll be 28 later this year. So he's another good option for them, can play across the line, doesn't seem to cause any trouble when he's not in the team as a starter. So it might be that they bring in Igor Thiago this summer, let Tony leave, bring in a right winger, a lefty right winger, and potentially then come January even, they could start to maybe invite some bids for Mbeumo. But I think ideally they'd rather keep him until next summer. I like Brentford. I like them as a club. I like what they stand for. I love the history of the club. I was fortunate enough to go to the old Griffin Park on a couple of occasions. So I've always had like a little bit of a soft spot for them. I like how they've gone about their business in getting themselves into the Premier League. I love the fact that they built a smaller stadium that fits into its surroundings and complements the area. They've also helped regenerate some of the local area. They're involved in their community. And I think all of this stuff is very, very promising. So yeah, I hope they continue to do well. And I'll be back after the break.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become? Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
The delicious ice-cold taste of Dr. Pepper has a lasting effect on people. Lindsay from Sacramento said,
Pro tip, 40 degrees is the perfect temperature for an ice-cold Dr. Pepper.
why is 40 degrees the perfect temperature for Dr. Pepper? We brought in Sue from Duluth, Minnesota to tell us.
Oh, yeah, I know a thing or two about cold. Oh, that right there is the perfect kind of ice-cold for Dr. Pepper. I'd share that with my friend Nancy. She likes Dr. Pepper, too, you know. My coldest...
All right, that'll be all, Sue. Having a perfect temperature for your Dr. Pepper? It's a Pepper thing. Inspired by real fan posts.
Right, welcome back. I should have said before I went to break that what I think Brentford need to do this summer, if they do target a left-footed right winger, that's fair enough. But I think more pressing needs have to come at the other end of the field. I think they should target a new goalkeeper. I'm not sold on Flecken at all. I think they could use another centre-back, preferably a left-footed one, because Ben Mee is getting older and is also starting to show signs of injuries and break. I think a right back, so that you have a right back, you have Rico Henry, and then Aaron Hickey can play both sides. So let's say your right back has 25 starts, Henry has 25 starts, and then Hickey gets 13 starts in both positions. giving him 26 starts. So it's all balanced out nicely between them. Had Southampton not come up, I would have said, go and get Kyle Walker-Peters. If Southampton need to sell, I would still say, go and get Kyle Walker-Peters. And I think they could do with a body in midfield. Just somebody to freshen up the midfield group, because Norgard is 30 now. He's been there a long time. Jensen's been there a long time. And again, someone that has some injury issues. Josh De Silva is frequently injured. Onyeka hasn't moved the needle, but he's a fine squad player to have. Damsgaard has been flat out poor. I really like Janelt. But I do think they have to overplay him a bit. And he's also forced to play in a lot of different positions. Like, he played games at left back and all sorts last season. Now, maybe one of the younger players that you have, maybe Ryan Trevitt can step up. Maybe Eunice Koenig can step up. Maybe he's going to be ready this year. I don't know. But if he's not, and if none of these younger players like Yarmuluk, if they're not ready, then I think you could do with a body in midfield. If they are ready, then great, and save your money. Because the midfield group is fine as is. It would just be wouldn't be a big money thing. It would just be somebody to freshen it up, provide a bit more competition. But if that can be Yarmuluk, if it can be Konak, if it can be Trevitt, I don't know anything about him. I know he had a loan at Exeter this past season. But if one or two or all of them are ready to step up, then you're set in midfield and you don't need to worry about it. Goalkeeper, left-footed centre-back, right-back, and then that right-footed wing or left-footed right winger, if you want to prepare for the likely departure of Mbeumo either next summer or even in January, if that's what it comes to. I think ideally next summer. Now, one player that might be on their radar because he's at their sister club, FC Midtjylland in Denmark, is Dario Osorio, who is a Chilean left-footed right winger, seems to have a real eye for goal. Last season, at the age of just 19, turning 20, he scored 8 goals in 23 games, which is pretty impressive for his first season there. At Universidad de Chile, he scored 11 goals in 51 games, which pretty impressive at 17, 18, 19. So I do think he's one they might take a look at. He'd be ideal to bring in as a squad player that you can develop, and then he can step into the breach when Mbeumo moves on. Now, there's probably some other players at Midtjylland that they will target. I don't know enough about them. So we'll see. I do love the fact there's a fella there who just, Brazilian lad, who just goes by the name Charles. That's tremendous. Moroni, these players are probably too old as I just look at the basics of what age are these lads. Are they big talents, or are they pretty much the finished product? Because if they're the finished product and they're playing in Denmark, then that's not going to be something that Brentford are going to want to do. The Frankelino Jew, he is very highly regarded. He's the other attacker that's there that's very, very highly thought of. So maybe he's one that they look to bring in as well. If they do that, they might not. They haven't really dipped into that well. Only really Onyeka, isn't it? He's the only one they've brought from there, I think. So they might just look elsewhere. But yeah, that's what they should do. Right. We move to Brighton and Hove Albion, a club that currently has a bit of uncertainty around them because obviously Roberto De Zerbi has parted ways. I'd be very curious to see where he lands. I think it's interesting that Brighton haven't yet announced a successor. It seems like they're still very much deciding who they want. Graham Potter's name did the rounds. It seems like that was just mediocre journalist putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with the number 7. The two names that are commonly heard are Hendrick, who's at Malmo, and Fabian Herzliya, who is really interesting. He's 31 years of age, born in America, raised in Germany. He is incredibly highly thought of. Incredibly highly thought of. He only moved into full-time management 2 years ago. He had been a player manager at a club called Pippensried for 4 years, from the age of 23 to 27. Then he went back to playing for a kind of a lower league, almost part-time team. And then he got the St. Pauli job. And I think he initially went there as an assistant. I think that's what he was an assistant there and playing part-time himself. But regardless, he has taken them from being an also-ran afterthought in the second division of German football into the Bundesliga. And if you know German football, you know that St. Pauli are a really admirable club with a wonderful fan base, a wonderful fan culture. And they've basically, in a similar way to how people admire Union Berlin, they've kind of captured what a lot of people are looking for in a football club, or even in a second club. You know, if you're an English football fan, but you like the idea of having a club in Europe that you keep an eye on, I think they've become the pick for a lot of people. And their stadium is great, genuinely great. If you're ever in Hamburg, this is the club to go and watch. Hamburg is fine themselves. The stadium's nice, a little bit dated, though it has been done up since I was there. But that's just a normal day out at a German game. St. Pauli is different. St. Pauli is very different. And I highly recommend a pilgrimage to go and watch them play. So, to bear in mind, when he took over, they'd finished 5th in the second Bundesliga the year before. They were floating away in the bottom half when he took over. He was appointed on the 6th of December. Now, on the 6th of December, they had played 17 matches and were sitting in 15. And he immediately turned things around. They won their first 10 league games in a row under him. Then lost back-to-back games. Then won 3 of 5 with 2 draws to finish the season. So 13 wins, 2 draws, 2 defeats in his first 17 league matches. I don't care who you are. That's very, very impressive. And from there, they roll into this past season. They hit the top of the league after match week 8. They're unbeaten, by the way, through 8 games. They stay top of the league for all bar 1 week for the next 20 weeks, losing 3 games in that time. Then they had a bit of a battle to just stay top ahead of Holstein, but they were promoted. Them and Holstein, they were coming up, it was obvious. So both of them did a little bit dip towards the end, but eventually St. Pauli won out and finished top. But to have that first run that Herzliya had, and then to put together the season they had last year, very, very impressive. Very, very impressive. I only watched them play maybe 3-4 times a season, finding second Bundesliga games. Not the easiest thing in the world, but there were a couple of really notable players there that I just wanted to just watch more than anything else. So Johannes Eggestein was there. He's ex-Werder Bremen. I watched him come through the Bremen Academy into the first team. And when he joined St. Pauli, I've just kept an eye since. Marcel Hartel, who was at Cologne, was very highly regarded. Big things were expected of him. Never quite found the right level. He found it with St. Pauli the last couple of years. Now he's moved on. He's joining PAOK in Greece. He was great last year. Dapo Afolayan, who was in Chelsea's academy and then was in the Toronto FC academy. And then when he came back to England, went to non-league and was playing with Tooting and Mitcham United. I think he went to Canada for university. I think that's what it was. He left the Chelsea academy to go there, either for university or to prepare for university. But it never quite worked out. So he ends up coming back to England, drops into the lower league while still pursuing his education. West Ham take a chance on him. He doesn't quite make the grade there, but he earns a loan to Bolton where he impresses. Then he has 2 good years at Bolton and then somehow ends up at St. Pauli. He's had a mad career. He's only 26. He's just one to keep a close eye on. There's just some interesting players there. Jackson Irvine is there as well. Obviously well known as an Australian international. Former Celtic player, was at Hull for 3-4 years. So he's pretty well known. He's been good for St. Pauli since going there. But yeah, so watched them play a few times. They play good football. They do play an attractive brand of football. He seems to be quite pragmatic though, because defensively they were really strong. Really, really strong. But that's what Brighton need, is someone that's going to play good football but have that strong defensive base. Now, 31 is crazy young. Crazy, crazy young. Like, if we consider the fact that Brighton and Hove Albion are captained by Lewis Dunk, who is 32 years of age. So he potentially, next season, could be playing for a manager who is over a year younger than him. Dunk is a November 91 baby, and Herzliya is a February 93 baby. God, I feel old. And he's not the only 30 plus in that Brighton team. Like, you've got Pascal Gross is there. You've obviously got Danny Welbeck is there. You've got James Milner there. Joel Veltman is there. Like that, yeah, that could be quite funny to see quite a few of those Brighton players playing for a lad who's younger than them. And in the case of James Milner, quite a lot younger than him. Like almost 7 years, no, over 7 years younger than him. James Milner was, well, if he was Irish and he'd been a Catholic, I don't know if James Milner is Catholic or if he's Church of England. Like, James Milner would have been making his communion when Herzliya was born. Anyway, back to Brighton. They will appoint a manager, and I would back them to get that appointment right. This past season, I maintain that for Brighton and Hove Albion, this wasn't a bad season. It was a disappointing season based on what happened the year before. But to finish 11th is not bad. It's not great. It's worse than they would have hoped. But let's be really, really honest here. Brighton gave up in about February. You know, you look at the start of the season, they win 5 of the first 6. They do lose at home to West Ham, but they win 5 of the first 6. Then they don't win in their next 6. But there is some mitigating circumstances here. They lose heavily away to Villa, but they lose to Villa. Villa are a Champions League team. Draw with Liverpool, lose to City. All fine. You wouldn't be too happy about the draw with Fulham at home. Draw away to Everton, fine, especially considering Everton hammered them last year. Very disappointing draw at home to Sheffield United. Beating Forest away is good. Losing away to Chelsea is fair enough. Beating Brentford is good. Drawing at home to Burnley is not. Losing to Arsenal is fine. Drawing away with Palace is fine. Beating Spurs at home is fine. Drawing away to West Ham and even at home to Wolves, they're fine results. Getting pumped by Luton, unacceptable. Beating Palace at home 4-1, great. Losing to Spurs away, fair enough. Hammering Sheffield United away, grand. Drawing at home with Brighton, or with Everton rather. Given what they did to you last year, you'll take it. I should have said they gave up in March, not February, because that's the end of March. In February, you lose away to Fulham. Not the worst thing in the world, but the performance was awful. Lose at Anfield, no issue. Lose to Arsenal, fine. Get beaten by City, fine. Lose 3-0 at Bournemouth, that's not great. A draw away with Burnley, not great. You'd be disappointed with the draw away to Brentford, just given Brentford form at that time. Brentford were in terrible form. But to only win one of your last... What is that? Is that 10 games? Yeah, one of your last 10 games with 3 draws and 6 defeats. To win 2 of your last 12 with 3 draws and 7 defeats. 2 of the last 13, in fact. They won 2 of the last 13 games. They took some steps backwards, there's no question. But here's what I will say. They were wrecked by injury. In the Premier League, Veltman only starts 17 games. He's their first choice right back. Estupiñán starts 15, first choice left back. That's not ideal for starters. Igor Julio, who was their big summer signing in the defence to come in and replace Levi Colwill, starts 17 games. Doesn't play well. Had some injuries, but generally doesn't play well. So your defence was problematic, and Lewis Dunk was crap all year. I know they were quite impressed by Van Hecke. He's bang average. Adam Webster was a train wreck when he had to play. Lamptey had some more injury issues and just didn't ever look like he had the trust of the manager. Has never quite been the same since his hamstring exploded. So you've got major issues at the back. Barco came in January. He's definitely not a left back at the Premier League level. The midfield, so James Milner started 11 times. That's 11 too many in the Premier League. He's not good enough. But Solly March only started 7 games. That means he missed 31. He missed most of the season with an injury. He's very important to them starting right winger. On the left wing, Matoma only started 15 games. The bigger issue there is that Matoma and Estupiñán only overlapped for like 4 games. That was your best attacking punch last year, was that left side, Estupiñán and Matoma. Didn't have that this year. Things didn't work as well. Adingra had a pretty good season, but needs a settled position. Baliba, young player coming into a new league, only started 15 games, 27 appearances across all competition or across the league between starts and that. But I'd still be looking for a lot more from him next year as he's had a year to develop. You did have the positive of getting Jakob Moder back. Adam Lallana was played far too much. Thankfully, he's been released and will no longer be shaming their jersey. Milner should not have been given a contract extension. Neither should Danny Welbeck. They were poor decisions that were, I think, foisted upon them by De Zerbi before he left. But I think we'll see more from Buenanote next season. I think we'll see more from Adingra, more from Baliba. Should see more from Moder. Should see more from Jack Hinchelwood as well, who was pressed into action and looks a player. Evan Ferguson will step up next year, I would bet, and have a better year. I think João Pedro will kick on, and then Ciso will be back. So there should be much less Danny Welbeck next season. Much less Danny Welbeck. The summer business was mixed. João Pedro, great signing. Mo Dahoud didn't work out, but I do wonder under another manager. Milner was poor. Verbruggen was great, but the biggest issue I had with De Zerbi, of many issues that I took with him last year, was the decision to continually rotate between him and Jason Steele when Jason Steele is terrible. Now, what Brighton do have going for them is they've got two really, really good young goalkeepers coming back off loan. So next season, they'll be in a strong position. We'll come back to that. Igor Julio didn't really work out. It wouldn't surprise me if they tried to sell him this summer. Noel Atom is a young defender that was brought in from RB Leipzig's academy. Didn't play this season. Would expect that maybe he starts to get some minutes next season. Belieber, I think, will be a big player for them. I think he's got immense amounts of talent. And I do think Valentin Barco should be developed into playing the Solly March role on the right of the attacking midfield. I think from there, I think he could be lethal with his crossing and passing ability. Yeah, look, last summer they lost Colwill, they lost Caicedo, and they lost Alexis McAllister. And unfortunately, Billy Gilmore's nowhere near good enough to replace McAllister. Belieber was bought to replace Caicedo. Has the talent, didn't have the experience or the readiness. And Igor Julio was brought in to replace Colwill and just didn't do enough. So they need to tighten up a little bit again this summer, but they are great in terms of recruitment. So look, last summer they made 160 million of players that had cost them, I think, less than 15 between Alexis, Caicedo and Robert Sanchez. And that's very impressive. Very, very impressive. Kjell Scherpen is a talented goalkeeper. Now, he got injured on a loan at Sturm Graz, but if I was them, I'd be bringing him back and bringing him into the mix. Kasper Kozlowski, very talented Polish midfielder. I'd like to see him get an opportunity. I think Carl Rushworth looks a big talent as well. He was on loan at Swansea this past season. He might get another loan, but he could be the guy you bring in and have behind Verbruggen. Yasin Ayari is very talented, the Swedish midfielder that was at Blackburn. He could be one to give an eye to. He might get some opportunities. I think Andrew Moran's a big talent. He was on loan at Blackburn as well. And there's probably a bunch of others here as well that are unknown to a lot of us. Like I know Sarmiento's very talented. Maybe the new manager takes a shine to him. They need to work on their defence. Now, I would say they do need one in central midfield. I think Believe is going to be really good, but I would say go and get a physical player in defensive midfield that is more ready-made. Even if they're another young player, just someone that's a bit more ready-made. Maybe Lucas Gornadot, who they tried to sign last summer. Maybe go and get him. Because to be fair, him and Believe would be a monstrous pairing together. It's not like you can only play one or the other. You could definitely play both. But they need to work on the defence. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with Estupinan. My guess is he's going to stay, given he's missed a lot of the last season. And they'll want huge money for him. I think they'll try and keep him one more year. They need a new right back, and they need two new centre-backs. They need a Veltman type. I've said it before. I'm going to keep saying it. Go and buy Ronnie Edwards from Peterborough. They need two centre-backs. Go and buy Jacob Greaves out of Hull, and then go and buy a right-footed player to play next to him. You bring in those players. Greaves won't cost a fortune, coming from the Championship. Hull will need money to rebuild. Edwards, coming from Peterborough, so there's no way he's going to cost huge money. He's just finished the season playing in League One. Peterborough are looking at another season in League One ahead. He's already played 100 and... What are we looking at here? He's played 121 senior games in his career already. 122 senior games in his career already. Played once in the league for Barnet in the National League, 5 times in all competitions. And then Peterborough nabbed him. Go and get him. Go and get him. and go and get Greaves. And then you need one more centre-back. You can sell Webster. You can sell Igor. You have Dunk. You have Von Hecke. So you can potentially just run with them as your centre-back group. But Greaves needs to start, and whoever partners him is someone that's not playing for your club at the moment. And play Edwards at right back with Veltman rotating. Then at left back, you've got Estupinan. You might want to look to bring in a backup. Maybe you own one who's out on loan. I don't know for certain. But you've got to fix that defence. You really have got to fix that defence. And it doesn't need to be hugely expensive. Doesn't need to be hugely expensive at all. But like in attack, they're just so loaded. Like if we look at the right wing position, it could be Solly March, Barco, and Buenanote for that role. The 10 position could be Buenanote, could be Julio Encise, could be Kasper Keselowski, could be Pascal Gross if he stays. And then left, and Adingra can also play right wing. Left wing could be Adingra, could be Matoma. Like, there's just so many good options for them. And of course, let's not forget Ibrahim Osman, the young Ghanaian winger. He's set to arrive this summer as well. So there's another one to add to that left wing group. Like, they're really well stocked. And then up front, you've got João Pedro, you've got Evan Ferguson, and Ciso can play there as well. I didn't even mention Andrew Moran, who could play in midfield if he comes back and maybe stakes a bit of a claim. In midfield, if Ayari and Dahoud are ready, then maybe Barco could play in midfield. I'd still want one more. I'd still want a more physical ball winner. That's just what I would want. But maybe, Ayari's a really talented player. And maybe if he gets an opportunity this year, maybe he takes it. He's not the biggest, but he is tough and he does win the ball quite well. Him and Baliba, be very young though. And then so would Gorna Doat and either of them. But yeah, they're a club, midfield and attack. I think they're one midfielder away from being absolutely stocked across the board in midfield and attack. Starting right back, 2 starting centre-backs. Because I always see people say you can't change both centre-backs. Of course you can. It's easier to change both centre-backs than to change one centre-back. Because you can just buy 2 who will fit together. You can buy one based off the other, rather than have like Lewis Dunk trying to learn another new partnership. But yeah, starting right back, 2 starting centre backs, backup left back. Although it could just be Lamptey. To be fair, don't bother. Just use Lamptey there. 2 centre backs, right back, and 1 in midfield. And they're just going to be so good. And like, as I said, it doesn't need to be big money signings. It can just be Ronnie Edwards. I reckon 6 million gets Ronnie Edwards. Might be 15 to 17 to get Jacob Greaves. Gorna Doat probably will push you to the 20, 22 million. For the second time, I will rue the promotion of Southampton, because Howard Bellis would have been an ideal partner at Brighton for Jacob Greaves. And if they hadn't come up automatically, that might have been a deal that Brighton could have jumped in on. But, that's not something that's going to be hugely expensive. Maybe you look at one of the clubs that went down, and maybe there's a centre-back there that works for you. I know he didn't have a good season, but Ahmed Hodzic is still a good centre-back at Sheffield United, and maybe he could be had on the cheap after their relegation. Maybe there's one of the lads at Burnley, though. Dara O'Shea I do like, but I wouldn't necessarily buy him for Brighton. Esteve is the best of the group, but he's left-footed like Greaves. I mean, I was quite impressed with Ted Menji this past season, I have to say. I thought he did well. But you know who you could go and get, who's definitely available, is Trevoh Chalobah. He's definitely available. So you could go and get him, and it wouldn't cost a huge amount. Just give Chelsea back some of their money. I think they'll need to spend some money this summer. I don't know that there'll necessarily be a big sale for Brighton this summer, just with the injuries to Matoma and Stupid last season. Those were probably the two that were going to go, but those injuries might have scuppered them. I don't see them parting with Evan Ferguson yet. I think João Pedro needs another year there before he's ready to move on. So there might not be a big sale, but I still think there should be plenty of money to spend. And Tony Bloom is brave. Right, I'll leave it there. I'll be back after this break. Right, welcome back. So we have reports today in The Athletic that there are multiple parties interested in buying Everton Football Club. Unfortunately for those parties interested, there's also, it's not just about buying. Now, the fee will be low, you'd imagine. There's about 600 million in debt that needs to be cleared pretty instantaneously to the 777 partners who are pretty shady, to two other groups who've lent them money over the last couple of years. And then there's the stadium debt as well. So it's a tough one. Like, it is a tough one. You're buying an asset with a lot of debt sitting on it. You just hope it's not somebody opportunistic that comes in and immediately lobs the club into administration and then works from there. Joey Barton is a terrible set of lads, as we're all aware, and he now faces a new criminal trial over an allegation that he assaulted his wife. Barton was accused of assaulting his wife in a drunken row outside their home in southwest London in June 2021, which he denied. He was due to face trial in 2022, but his wife retracted her allegations. However, two senior judges have decided that he should stand trial, and rightly so. Rightly so. He is accused of... Actually, I'm not even going to read it because it's just horrible what he's done. It's just horrible what he's done. And there are witnesses, and I hope he goes to prison. He's a horrible, horrible human being. Let's see. Pau Cubarsí has been left out of the Spain squad for Euro 2024, along with Marcos Llorente and Alex Garcia. Ayoze Perez is in the squad, which will tell you all you need to know about how far Spain have fallen. Like, what on earth? Unai Simon, Alex Romero, and David Raya are the goalkeepers. Danny Carvajal, Jesus Navas, Emerick Laporte, Nacho Fernandez, Robin Lenormand, Danny Vivian is an interesting one. Alex Grimaldo and Marc Cucurella are the defenders. Rodri, Zubimendi, Fabian Ruiz, Mikel Moreno, Pedri, Alex Bayana, and Fermin Lopez are the midfielders. Alvaro Morata, Joselu, they're the two nines, and then the wide players are Dani Olmo, Nico Williams, Mikel Oyarzabal, Ayoze Perez, Ferran Torres, and Lamine Yamal are the forwards. It's a decent squad, but I don't think they're going to win anything. Jamie Vardy has signed a new 1-year contract to ensure he will stay at Leicester for another year. He has been there now 12 years and has scored 190 goals in 464 games. There will be a statue of Jamie Vardy outside of the King Power Stadium when he retires. There will be a statue, without question. Robbie Keane has left his role as Maccabi Tel Aviv manager after a year in charge. He won the Israeli Premier League and reached the last 16 of the Europa Conference League. Yeah, I mean, I think there's been some external pressure. I think he's made the right decision. It's an interesting piece on the BBC website written by Ian Williams and Rob Stevens about the state of football in Cameroon that I recommend everybody read. Scotland are set to cut Craig Gordon and John Souther from their squad when Steve Clarke announces the final squad of 26. And finally, we do the gossip. Chelsea and Belgium striker Romelu Lukaku has opened the door for a move to the Saudi Pro League. He didn't really open the door so much as run full speed through the door. Napoli, AC Milan and Fenerbahce are all linked. Any Napoli move would only happen if they sell Victor Osimhen. Everton risk losing Dominic Calvert-Lewin on a free in 2025 after a halt in contract talks. I expect he will leave Everton this summer. Chelsea are monitoring the developments of Calvert-Lewin while also looking at Benjamin Sesko, among others. 6 Premier League clubs, Chelsea, Villa, Newcastle, Everton, Forest and Leicester, face having to sell players before the end of June in order to comply with the profit and sustainability rules. Fair enough. Dominic Solanke has a release clause of 65 million in his contract, but it can only be activated by certain clubs. If England were going to bring a third striker, along with Kane and Watkins, he deserved it far more than Tony, based on the season we've just watched. Manchester United have made a £60 million bid for Lenny Yoro. No, they haven't. That's a lie. Chelsea have made Michael Elise one of the top targets. I mean, this is... Does anyone know who Nick Purewall is? Didn't think so. England defender Lucy Bronze wants to stay at Barcelona, even though she'll have better offers to play in other countries, and her club want to keep her beyond the end of the current contract. Okay. Barcelona and Spain forward Mariona Caldente has agreed to join Arsenal when her contract with Barca expires at the end of June. Raheem Sterling has no interest in a move to Fenerbahce. Max Allegri has been offered the chance to manage in the Saudi Pro League, but would like to take charge of a club in the Premier League. Dortmund want to sign Ian Maatsen, but are reluctant to meet 35 million valuation. It's not a valuation, it's a buyout clause, and they're not reluctant to meet it. They can't afford to meet it. There's a piece about Brighton and Fabian Herzlier. Brighton have held talks with Graham Potter. Again, I don't believe that they have. And the journalist, it's Ed Aarons, maybe they have. He's not popular with the fans, though. That's why I'd have a hard time seeing him back there. I think Leicester should go for him. Newcastle are in advanced talks with Lloyd Kelly, still 3 weeks after they began advanced talks with him. Sheffield United have registered an interest in Joe Worrell. Well, Joe Worrell's about to become a free agent, so you don't need to register an interest. You just make him an offer. Gabriel has said it is his dream to join Corinthians, the club he supported since he was a child. That's fair. And, you know, he's probably got another 4, 5, 6 years left in England at a decent level. So, yeah, at the end of that, he could go. Conor Gallagher is prepared to stay at Chelsea, despite interest from Aston Villa and Tottenham. He should, because then he'll have all the power, because he'll be out of contract next summer. Rafinha is part of Hansi Flick's plans. How would Sky Sports Germany know anything about what's going on at Barcelona? Like, let's be honest. And Hansi Flick is not telling anybody what his plans are. He hasn't even started the job properly yet. Drivel. Absolute drivel. Right, folks, that's it. That's me for the week. I will be back on Monday. Take care of yourselves. Have a good week. Thank you, as always, to our friends at Skybet. And remember, if you are engaging in gambling, please make sure you are over the age of 18, and make sure you check out begambleware.org just to keep yourself wise on what you're entering into. Or if you have entered in and are looking for a way back out, again, begambleaware.org can guide you. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.